Hello there everybody, what is going on? It's about Back to Hell 2040. This is part B, side B, whatever the fuck you want to call it, of the Device 3 part 2 reaction. We're just gonna get right into it. No intro needed. Y'all know what this video is. Y'all have been waiting for this one.
If you're about as old as I am,
y'all have probably been waiting for this.
It is nostalgic, isn't it? Maybe
we hit the intermission.
Felt more grandiose in their nature, if you will.
So
when your imagination could run wild, as you know.
We're not really missing anything here, since we did stop during the intermission.
Replaying them countless times, digging as deep as possible into them, trying to find secrets that may or may not be there, but it didn't matter whether they were or not. What it mattered,
and hopefully there will be no interruptions at all in this
one. May have faded over time, as it naturally
does. Make it better.
For better or worse. Yet, Deltarune feeds on that curiosity. Deltarune encourages it, even. Not quite in the sense of exhausting outcomes like Undertale, no, this is different. It feeds on the nostalgia for finding things that may or may not be there, even if you end up merely chasing shadows.
True.
Yes, the developer may have said the game only has one ending, but that's just on the surface. Everything else is there for you to find on your own.
You have to look into it,
yeah. It feels like there's still something we haven't quite found yet, even when you do data mine the game.
I feel like Toby is doing this intentionally, because he knows now, from looking at Undertale, like, he knows now that people are going to data mine his games. Like, no matter what. There are going to be people that go right to data mining after they finish the game, because data miners know that there can be some interesting things hidden in the code of games, which is why a bunch of people data mine Undertale, and a lot of people data mine Chapter 1, and a lot of people data mine Chapter 2, and there's going to be a lot of people that are data mining the later chapters to find interesting shit. It's like, we're gonna find these unused scripts in the later chapters because of data miners. This dialogue from this unknown entity is going to be continued. And I can't wait for Toby, or whoever this is, to explain why they're trapped in the code. Oh my god. That was bad. That was a bad voice crack. Wow. Ooh.
You may have noticed in this part I've been rambling more about the lore of the game than in part 1.
Yeah.
One reason for it, really, is that part 1 already covered a lot of the super meta stuff that piqued my interest.
It did.
And part 2 has just been following up on those things more than it was adding completely new elements to the table. But aside from that, there's many things about the lore that do tie into it. If the meta stuff was simply to illustrate that the mechanics are in place for these themes to be expressed efficiently, right now I'm trying to show you what those themes even are.
Yeah.
Everyone's talked a lot about the game through the lens of escapism and creating fiction as a means to cope with reality, but I think another potential cornerstone of the game's thematic foundation is nostalgia and curiosity.
True.
And I think Chapter 2 focuses on this especially as it challenges the preset linearity that the game set you up to expect over its full course. And so, it's an interesting dichotomy that has now been established in the game's meta-narrative to me. While as far as we know,
I love this like VHS effect that Molly's put over this.
Or ways to technically prove or disprove the possibility for certain things to happen, you just can't help but ask yourself, don't you miss exploring? Don't you miss the playground rumors? Sure, the thought of not knowing everything and something potentially sinister or completely malign hiding somewhere in your favorite game or media is scary, but is the complete finality that we have such easy access to now to remove all that mystique really much better? Is it not simply more interesting to dig into everything about a thing you like, even if it might not be inherently part of the intended experience? Even if it might...
People are gonna dig no matter what.
The process.
People are gonna dig for stuff no matter what.
Illustrates and especially highlights. Deltarune encourages you to find secrets in itself, and
the weird route is very, very interesting, because I don't know if it was data mined, or if people just found it by looking at the code normally, or what. All I know is that it was this big thing when it was announced by someone who made a guide that was like, hey, there's another route in this game. And people were confused. They were like, wait, don't you mean, like, the secret boss? Do you mean the secret boss thing? But no, it was not a secret boss. It was an entirely different fucking route in the game. In a game that Toby said there was only one ending. Technically, he's still right, though. I mean, even when you do Weird Route, you still get the same ending as if you didn't do a Weird Route. You still go back home, You still sit there with Susie, and Chris still opens what we assume is a dark fountain right in his home. So, I don't know if what Toby's saying with there's only one ending is still true. We'll just have to wait for other chapters and see if other chapters have their own weird route or a different kind of route here. Which is why I was saying for the longest time that I am going to be doing a Deltarune marathon where I play through all chapters of Deltarune live on stream. First by going the quote-unquote pacifist-like thing where we recruit every single enemy, and then we do a full Snowgrave or full Weird Route or whatever it's gonna be for the later chapters. Because I want to see just how dark it can get. Chapter 2's Weird Route was already dark, but later chapters are going to be, yeah, they're gonna be crazy.
The Weird Route to me is the absolute most extreme application of that. Not
Yeah.
just going off the beaten path, but finding an entire loophole to both forge your own path and mold the already laid out one into something completely different.
That is true, because you would never think to, what if I go backwards and backtrack with Noelle? But then instead of fighting enemies with Chris, I use Noelle to freeze them. Like, no one is going to think of that on their own. There needs to be at least some sort of help where you can figure out that doing these certain actions will trigger an entirely different route in the game. It's not known, you know? And I think we went over this earlier in part A of this, or side A of this, or whatever. Toby never acknowledges the Weird Route at all. It's never, like, promoted. It's not in any of the advertisements. It's not in the game's description. The only place that you can see it is in the code when it's referred to as Weird Route. So, I don't know.
Something much
Feels like Toby wanted us to
no
find
help,
it.
No guidance on if we're even supposed to be able to do this, if this is even meant to be real. And
It feels like Toby wanted us to do this.
Glitch Hunter is the one responsible for this route even being possible. I think it's only natural that a character of that sort is the channel through which we are now forced to lay our nostalgia and curiosity bare for the game to see, and to break itself down upon. And you'll see soon enough that I think a lot of the themes in this game, in fact, do tie back around to Noelle, or at least to Des. And the weird route and its sheer lack of
it is very, very interesting that Noelle is the focus point of this route, which is going against the norm when, Molly will get to this during this sweepstakes part, but we know Noelle's no glitch hunter, so it's like, that's SPAMTON sweepstakes alert. So it's not out of the question for Toby to put this glitch hunter as the forefront and the main focus of a route that's purely designed through finding a secret in the game. Because again, Weird Route has not been referred at all by Toby. Toby has not referred to it at all.
Advertising for it,
So
it goes to show for me that Deltarune knows exactly what it's doing.
And Toby knows what he's doing.
Secrets. Deltarune lives in secrets in what could be.
Toby
Rumors and rumors turn to fiction.
Toby knows what he's
In
doing.
many smaller ways between the very
He knows what he's
obvious way you
doing.
find chapter
He
1
definitely knows what he's
especially,
doing.
Or the secret bosses, or even that creepy smile in the Queen's basement that you
He
can
knows what
just
he's
saw
doing.
for a split second.
Yeah.
But the Weird Route's very nature especially is shrouded in darkness. Just like how, for a time, all of those same mysteries and creepypastas and glitches were once shrouded in that same darkness, like some of us might wish it still was. Especially when that was at its peak and the scope of internet horror was much different, it was easier to believe that kind of stuff.
True.
Or maybe I was just a dumb kid. I don't know. Like, this was the age where I was afraid of Slender Man finding me in my sleep, and I actually thought I saw him once. Or at the age where I was obsessed with Tails doll summoning videos, and back when
Oh, yeah.
used to make haunted gaming vids. Man, But regardless, the existence of this route completely subverts the expectations and established meta-narrative that Chapter 1 appeared to be setting up.
It does.
And it adds a lot of potential depth to what Deltarune could be really getting at. In Undertale, the existence of a pacifist and no mercy route made sense as it was meant to be a way of subverting the expectations of how people are used to playing RPGs. Questioning what really
Yeah, Undertale's genocide route was pretty much, like, not even hidden at that point. Like, the game kind of encouraged you to be like, what if instead of sparing and not fighting these enemies, I instead kill everything? Like, the game kind of encouraged you, the game kind of pushed you to it because of its nature, because of the whole, like, oh, you can actually spare these monsters and not fight them. The game kind of pushed you in the direction of, like, hey, we know that you can spare all these monsters, but what if you didn't? What if you killed everything? What would that be like? But whereas in Deltarune, it's like there's one ending, there's only one ending, your choices do not matter. But they do. They do matter.
Constitutes completing a game and being happy with it and making sure it did everything it could to remind you that this is not a game where you are above consequences.
Yeah.
The routes all played into each other well, and each one served their own purpose to the game's meta-narrative.
True.
So, for a game like Deltarune to start by making sure you thought it was like Undertale, just to pull a psych on you and give you complete whiplash with something totally new and hammering this point in of your choices not meaning anything, only to actually give you the option to do a route like this if you really went out of your way to look for it, is a hell of a curveball. But
It
at
is.
the very least, I do want to take a look at this route to note all of the things that I think really stand out that may be relevant to more meta
we're gonna
stuff,
take a
which
look
is
at the
probably
weird
the
route.
fucking majority of it, but, you know, and just leave it at that. We have no idea still where the hell this kind of route will go from Chapter 2, but I think there's no harm in gathering any relevant info from it anyway. So let me start with the general gameplay loop of this route. Okay, off script, I know I keep saying route and route interchangeably.
Yeah.
I don't know which one it is. Is it route or route? I don't know, poke me in the comments or something about it if it matters, because
I hear interchangeably a lot. I hear route and then I hear route interchangeably quite a lot, so I don't know. I don't know what the exact pronunciation of it is. I hear either.
no fucking idea.
I've heard
I
both.
have no respect for this goddamn language, honestly, I'm not gonna lie to you. When starting a weird route, the whole chapter up until you meet Noelle on your own is completely identical, so we can just skip through all of that. Once you meet Noelle, though, and have her
I
in
mean,
the party, you're
Weird Route doesn't really start until this point, so you can just play the game normally, I think, up until this point.
able to begin the route as soon as you use Ice Shock for the first time. You freeze your first enemy and you hear a very ominous jingle that pretty much trailheads the weird route. The first step here is pretty much just freezing every enemy you come across in Cyber City, as you notice her health actually goes up a bit.
And it's really interesting that you have to first defend with Chris, because that is the only way that you can get Ice Shock, and it just so happens that defending with Chris gives 16% TP, which is exactly the amount you need for Ice Shock. It's kind of weird how that works out, you know? Kind of strange how, coincidentally, a defend gives you the exact TP needed to kill an enemy with Ice Shock. Also, yeah, Noelle's HP does go up.
With each encounter that she freezes. It may also be worth noting that you were able to bring Noelle to the door to SPAMTON shop, and she comments on it being creepy, yet also nostalgic. When the second Weird Route jingle plays, then using this video as reference, this would be once you clear every enemy in the trash zone, the roads stop having cars, and now there's more enemies for you and Noelle to freeze. After killing a few more, a third jingle plays, and now even the stats menu changes, with Chris and Noelle having very bare-bones descriptions. Chris having the title of leader,
Yeah, leader
commands,
and then
Frostmancer
Frostmancer freezes the enemy.
who freezes the enemy. Notably, she is level 2 at this point, where normally she would be at level 1, as a snowcaster with a description might be able to use some cool moves.
The stat changes may also actually occur earlier this point in the route. I don't know for sure. Also, levels goes up if the option is at all. Like, it's also okay. So, it's not even tied to Snowgrave at that point, then. It's just the title changes when it goes up. But it's interesting that the title goes to Frostmancer freezes the enemy. I don't know if that changes to it if you don't freeze an enemy with Noelle. Like, does it go up regardless? like, if you don't use Ice Shock and instead just play normally, does it change to Frostmancer?
Moves. The first annoying mouse room also provides the first opportunity of very cool Sigma-based Themby moments from Chris,
Yes.
or rather yourself, although you do not need to do this in order to carry out the weird route. It's not mandatory. Normally,
Although, people have mistakenly considered this to be mandatory for this route, there are a couple things that are not mandatory for this route. Like, there's a couple things that you can just not do, and you'll still be on the weird route. You just need to make sure that you kill every enemy with Noel. But yeah, first moment where Chris is absolutely based. The NB, when the NB is based,
you just push this block to the appropriate spot so Noel can catch up to you, but through repeatedly walking down to the exit, you get the first of many dialogue prompts that simply just read, "Proceed." This being an option that pops up many times in later conversations with Noel, but we'll get to them shortly. While this isn't necessarily important to the weird route, it certainly is out of character enough that I'd consider it part of that ballpark. Because even if not required for this route, Noel still comments on how bossy that was of Chris.
Yeah.
A central point of this route being just
the first sort of, what is it? Implication. Yeah, the first sort of implication that Chris and the, what the fuck? I got fucking pinged. I got fucking ping. I got fucking pinged in my chatter now. Yep, turn off chatter now. What the lost my entire train of thought there. What the fuck? What was I saying? Yes, first implication that Chris and the player are entirely separate. And it just becomes more apparent through the route that Chris and the player are entirely separate, and that they are not a stand-in for you. They are their own person, and so are you. So, Noah kind of talks about the fact that, hey, wait, they're acting strange. They're not really doing what I thought they'd be doing. They seem different, you know? And of course, when I say they, I'm talking about Chris, because they're NB. Every single time that somebody refers to them, they use they and them for Chris. Chris is non-binary. No, they are not a stand-in for the player. No, it is not up for interpretation. Just fucking read the dialogue and you will see that Chris is non-binary. Fuck. So many people think that it's up for interpretation, and some people argue that Chris is actually male when it's like, no, the fuck they're not. They're NB. They're non-binary. They just like me for real, you know?
Forcing a roll upon them and making them act extremely out of character.
They're just like me.
A different outcome. Moving on, the
An
story
NB,
continues to be ever
you know?
slightly more empty than before, with a noticeable lack of characters like most of the Addisons at this point in the route. A fourth jingle now plays once you get to the room with the Ferris wheel ad after killing every enemy up to that point. And this ad is where another very worrying interaction can happen. I believe similarly not mandatory, but still stands out.
Also, yeah, this one's also not mandatory, but it's good to mention this one because of just how creepy it is. Yeah, this one is I mean, you can continue Weird Route without doing this, but doing it kind of gives you some interesting dialogue. It's kind of weird. Roll credits.
Where you can select I will ride with you, and then Noelle will ride with me, to her understandable concern.
And I find it interesting that they, instead of insisting that you will ride with me, the text box says Noelle will ride with me, as if they're talking in the third person. Again, that is not Chris saying that. That is us, the player, telling them to say that. We are basically forcing them to say something, and Noelle once again comments on the fact that that is not very like of Chris to say that. Is it obvious that the player and Chris are separate now? Is it obvious to you? Because it's obvious to me. And it's been obvious to me ever since I played the weird route. So,
just shrugging it off as a prank. Then you talk to the Addison near the Ferris wheel lad and tell them that you and Noelle are not friends, but something else, and this is where they tell you about the freeze ring and that Noelle can't get stronger without good equipment. You can say, get it, only to come up $1 dark dollar short. And then a few more times, Noelle realizes you're...
Also, by the way, the game was programmed to always be $1 dark dollar higher than your current dark dollar count. So if you literally had, like, 7,000 dark dollars, the price of that ring would be 7,001. It's just programmed that way. It's literally programmed that way. The game is hard programmed to be at least $1 dark dollar higher than whatever you have at that current moment. So, it's not really a web exclusive thing. It's not really, much to mention. It's literally just a coding thing. It might be relevant to the web route. I don't know, but from my understanding, it's always programmed to be $1 higher than your current count. So, Toby being a troll, I guess. A little bit of trolling, Just a little bit, though. A little bit.
Her to get it, and after forcing her through insistence, she kills the Addison, and you get the freeze ring. This is also one of a few instances where she's basically trying to convince herself that she didn't do anything and that nothing actually bad happened.
She is gaslighting herself into saying that, no, this is a good thing. I'm getting stronger. Chris would not do anything bad to me. They are the ones that know what's best for me. She's gaslighting herself.
She continues to do this, the bracketed dialogue implying that she's thinking to herself and not saying this stuff out loud. And then you're given a dialogue choice to tell her that her thoughts of getting Chris zapped are either horrible or natural, and this is definitely worth...
Also, they didn't note this down before, Molly didn't note this down, but looking at the info for that ring, kind of implies that the Addison has been trapped inside the ring, so... just wanted to mention that because might be important later. I don't know if Molly will mention it or not, but it's important, I think. I don't know.
Noting meta-wise, this is the first instance of the game acknowledging the fact that the player is able to read other characters' thoughts, and said characters actually getting kind of freaked out by that.
Yeah.
And this...
The most like, wait a minute, I must have said it all, and no you didn't, bitch. You didn't, bitch. Because we're the player, and we can read what you're thinking. So of course we'll be able to respond to what you're thinking, because we are separate from Chris. Is it any more obvious now that the player and Chris are separate? It is not a self-insert. Chris is not a self-insert for us. Some people still believe that. I don't know why they do, but it's just not true. They are very, very incorrect about that.
Eventually leads into Noelle realizing that she's hearing a voice that is definitely not Chris's. The fifth jingle now plays, and at this point the city now plays a slower version of its theme. You continue to get items, and the save points
this is a good version.
Text, now stating that you and Noelle were filled with power. Enemies start running away from you when they spot you now rather than forwards.
Yep.
Any signs that used to stop cars are now frozen as there's no need for them anymore. And when you go down to where the fake out game over and second egg used to be, instead you're met with a closed dumpster with SPAMTON hiding inside of it. He actually enables you to continue going down this route, as he implies he has a deal for you if you kill more enemies, telling you specifically how many you're still missing. When you reach the second and third mouse puzzles, there's more very awesome and based interactions that proceed to take place, pretty much
based and the moment again.
Both puzzles, as Noelle struggles to deal with her coping mechanism of blinking any memories of her actions thus far from her recollection completely. The sixth and seventh jingle play at these puzzles respectively.
And I wanna point it out here. I don't know if Molly will point it out, but I wanna point it out that Chris turns towards the camera when you finish this puzzle. And I don't know if this is on purpose or not, but Chris looking through the fence here gives them a creepy smile. I don't know if Toby intended for that to happen, or if that's just like a coincidence, but either way, it's really fucking cool. It's a really nice touch, intentional or not, it is. Ooh.
And after killing all the enemies in the room after, you'll have met all the requirements for SPAMTON's deal, which, for 1997 Chromer, you get the Ring of Thorns, which makes Noelle take damage while wearing it, down to 55 HP, but reduces the cost needed to cast Ice Magic.
Oh yeah, when translated 55 to almost LV, like referencing level or love, don't know if that is intended as well, but it's a nice touch, you know? It's a very, very nice touch for Noelle's HP to be drained exactly to 55.
And finally, the main event, or at least one of the two main events, the fight with Birdley. Noelle just sees Birdley as another enemy at first before giving a 1,000-yard stare at him, and after another Sigma envy moment, the fight begins with Noelle urging Birdley to run away. The music is much more simple, more intense than it would be originally, and even where Chris is down, Noelle doesn't listen to Birdley because she still hears the player's voice. And once you reach max TP, you're able to use a new spell. Snowgrave, which is just described as
fatal.
Noelle insists that she doesn't know what that spell is. She doesn't know what you're talking about, but eventually snaps at you and does it anyway, just because you wanted to see it so badly. And then
we get this. The greatest moment in Snowgrave, and the most shocking, Noelle freezing Birdley.
Asks what happened, completely blinking on what she just did only a few seconds ago before leaving through the upper alley and going back to her room in the mansion. You go up that same path, which immediately just sends you to the entrance to Queen's mansion as you regroup with Susie and Rouse. Susie notices pretty quickly that Chris looks upset, which I think goes without explaining as to why. But is shrugged off pretty quickly, and at this point the sequence break part of the route really kicks into full gear because what the fuck? The mansion has things like Susie's ultimate healing, and the lore surrounding certain Darkners not belonging in other Dark World is explained very unceremoniously. Instead of the usual music playing, now Deal Gone Wrong plays throughout the mansion as you find out the butlers are holed up somewhere and the queen is nowhere to be even found. You also learn that the strange force that's taken over is SPAMTON as he's changing forms down in the basement, thanking Neil and Noelle for giving him the opportunity to do so, only specifying that he sure hopes no one tries to steal the fountain. I don't have
Does he know
the mansion up until the very end, honestly, other than some things are altered.
Does he know about us wanting to seal the fountain? Bro does not know what the fuck we're doing.
Like, you fight Mouse Wheel, Task Manager, and Wire in different rooms, and the table puzzle is now just a Peepus maze. That
maze
is literally it, I think.
Yeah.
But the next notable part is when you're near Noelle's room. Susie asks Chris to go with her to save Noelle, but Chris doesn't say anything, and you don't get any choice to make Chris say anything either. Rouse does the thing he usually does when Susie's off on her own, asking if Chris wonders what Susie is doing,
but Chris
again,
does not
no
listen.
Response, which could be taken as Chris trying to keep the player's perspective away from Susie as much as possible now. Although Rouse then says, "You're right, Chris, it has only been 30 seconds. Which, it could have one of two meanings, because this is yet another instance of Rouse to me just being kinda weird. On top of me already mentioning that this moment pretty much results in Susie coming back and Rouse trying to learn what happened, only for Susie to shrug it off and say she'll explain it later, which prompts Rouse to be probably more caught off guard than in any other moment in the game. I feel like him saying this could either mean that Chris told him that it's only been 30 seconds, which could be possible because we never hear Chris's voice. But I also wonder if, assuming he's just referring to the player here and not Chris, that he takes the silence from the player as a response. Susie also seems very eager to move on, and I can't help but wonder if she's just trying to get going with stopping Queen, or if even with what she told about what happened, that there's something about her conversation with Noelle that made either of them uncomfortable. But
we never really do know what went on behind that door when Susie went in with Noelle. So, something probably could have happened during their chats, which either bothered Susie or creeped her the fuck out, or made her entirely anxious to the point where she didn't want to be in that room anymore. So
you continue on, having completely skipped that sequence, and also skipped the Queen boss fight altogether, as she notes that Noelle isn't in a condition to help her now, and she can't find Birdley anywhere. All of the important lore you get here regarding the roaring as such is completely glossed over. Susie then goes to see Noelle again before you leave to seal the fountain.
Yeah, the roaring speech and stuff is like completely and totally destroyed and ruined because, you know, the main character Burley is dead and Noelle is in her room. Probably scarred for life because she just froze Burley. Yeah! Cool! I love it. Awesome.
And I think
Fantastic.
there's a pretty strong implication here that Noelle is just dead asleep in her room at this point after everything that happened, or at least that there's something that was left out in whatever Susie said about Noelle in her room, but anyway. You go to seal the fountain, and so the other main event happens.
Yes.
The mandatory
SPAMTON.
fight against SPAMTON Neo as he's pissed at you for trying to seal
And this one's actually mandatory instead of the main route being an optional fight. You are forced to fight SPAMTON. This is not optional. This is not a side thing. You are forced to fight him alone.
fountain and breaking whatever alliance he thought he had with you. And so the fight starts. And there's a lot of dialogue that SPAMTON throws out that's unique to this fight. One bit being, you've been making, haven't you? You've been making hyperlink blocked. Which I think adds further to my best choice. When he mentions hyperlink blocked, it must be referring to control or also likely freedom or possibly even power.
Not love. It can't be love. You're making love. Ew. What? Probably choices? Making freedom, making independence, making power, something along those lines. Like, I don't know what he's referring to here. Obviously it's being blocked out because... why? I don't really know what the significance of hyperlink blocked is, but it does bear some significance to the overall story of not only the main route but the weird route.
Could power be a potential mechanic similar to how determination is?
Power specific element thing the game explores similar to what determination was in order to and regards to taking general control. Could be. Power could be a game mechanic similar to determination. Because we really don't hear much about power at all.
In the sense that having
until this word out
control over reality. I mean, aside from the save point mentioning that you're just filled with power,
the only other
you're otherwise filled with the power of something, and that power is what regenerates your HP and what lets you save. Hell, the song that's used when you're sealing fountains is called Your Power.
Your Power, yeah.
And that's a second potential video to make about Deltarune, aside from talking about stats.
Ooh.
Jesus Christ, man. The fight doesn't have anything of note until his defense phase when you're unable to leave a dent in him until you try acting. It starts with just blank prompts showing Raze or Susie's icons saying that nobody came when Chris tried to call for their help.
Yes.
And then you get to Noelle's icon, where it's not Chris calling for help, it's you whispering Noelle's name. While there are instances...
In the first actual instance of the game, directly referring to you, the player, besides all of the things where you use items, but that could be interpreted as just the game referring to Chris.
Instances of the game using you and Chris interchangeably, it's pretty universally agreed upon that this is a case where the distinction is likely very intentional.
Yes.
SPAMTON scolds you at first for it, before...
Screen cuts out. Here. And then... we assume that's Noelle. Not even Your Power plays. It's just silence until you get walked back into the...
sorry, there's a lot of moments in this chapter that I think are just better left without summary.
Yep.
Back in the light world, Noelle wakes up and she recounts some of what happened.
It's a very, very, like, you know, kind of like a moment where you're just sitting there like... did Noelle really just... And it's completely silent, too. There's no playing of Your Power there. It's just completely silent. You're just sitting there, taking it all in as Noelle presumably kills Spent and Neo. And you're just like, what the fuck? And the what the fuck moments don't stop there, because you get this moment where Birdley is sleeping. Yes, let's just say he's sleeping eternally. Also, bit of a side thing here. I don't know if Molly's gonna mention this, but we know that in this game, or in the Undertale universe, Stealth universe, whatever, when monsters die, they turn to dust, which is how they're dead. Birdley wasn't turned to dust. He was just frozen alive. So, technically, Birdley's not dead? Because we just froze him. So it's safe to say that Birdley is stuck in like this limbo, you know? Maybe Birdley's stuck in this limbo where, you know, he's not dead, but he's definitely not alive here as well, so, I mean...
Happened with Susie, and Birdley doesn't wake up.
Birdley's definitely not alive.
Starts it off as exhaustion and him resting a bit, and then quickly leaves. There's only a few things that should really be mentioned at this point. Going to Castletown is just kind of depressing, as Queen is one of the only people who really make it there, since, well, you fucking killed everyone else, and the fact that this route makes Queen actually kind of upset is good enough reason for me to never want to play it myself. And the last thing I can really go over now is what happens when you go to the hospital.
Yes.
The interaction mostly plays out as normal, but slightly altered, so that now Noelle doesn't want to give Rudy control over her game to him, and once you leave the room, Rudy asks to have a word with Susie, and Noelle keeps convincing herself that what
Please tell me
happened
that you're gonna mention this.
Can't help but feel like
Please tell me that you're gonna mention this.
Something else. And she becomes aware of a voice.
There's a thing that
to do, one unlike
Molly
Chris's. And she catches on to
might
how
mention.
weird Chris has been acting in general and wants to figure out why. You get a dialogue choice saying that you wanted to see Noelle or just her father. Either way, she gets startled, and after she tries to assure herself that it was just a dream, even after hearing her voice again, you get the choice to either say nothing or that it wasn't actually a dream. Susie walks in.
Please tell me that you're gonna mention this.
Leaves. There's other things that are unique to this scene as well, like her noticing that you have
Yes!
the watch if you ever equip
Yes!
it on Chris in the Dark World.
Yes!
The fact that this is the only scene so far where you have player control outside of this dialogue box, and you can step towards Noelle to skip to the later bit of
You
the
can!
game, then again to make her tell you to stop getting closer, and
Yeah.
then one more time to just dismiss the scene entirely. And that's the weird route. The game ends the same.
Yeah. I was waiting for Molly to mention that if you have Noelle's watch in that moment, then Noelle freaks the fuck out because she thinks that it was a dream, yet you have her watch. How did you get her watch if it was a dream? So...
Anyway, even if you go through this route in its entirety, although there are plenty of moments throughout the weird route where you are able to abort it, whether by selecting a different dialogue choice, or choosing to spare Birdley, or use anything other than Snowgrave on him to deplete his health. In this case, everything pretty much goes back to normal, and the game progresses through the normal route again, and a new jingle plays as a cue of this.
Yep.
But other than that, that is honestly everything I can say about it.
Oh?
Hell, honestly, that's kind of a wrap for this part of the analysis overall. What a fucking ride. This chapter has been incredibly dense. I'm adding some of this in last minute because in the rush of trying to just get through all these topics, I've realized how easy it is to forget to know when to wrap things up proper because I didn't want to stretch this video's runtime any longer than it already is. I think where Chapter 1 gave me a lot of room to focus on some of the more meta parts of the game, Chapter 2 is mostly following up on those things, but also adding so many things to the table that we can't even begin to fully understand in the bigger picture, to the point that I felt I had no choice but to go kind of rapid fire with some of what I talked about. There's God knows how many ways to go from here on, and as it stands, with only 2 chapters out for us to play, we're at yet another cliffhanger. Chapter 1 may have established the game's themes of control and how that influences a player-protagonist dynamic and the dissonance between us and Chris, but Chapter 2 really nailed that theme in like nothing else. Chris has been given a lot more moments to be able to act and do things on their own accord and to get in the way of some of our actions, and likewise we have had many more opportunities to completely break the order of things and, if you really wanted to, impose your will on Chris to the point of using them to manipulate their friends into much more concerning circumstances. And yet, despite all of that, at the end of the day, we have a similar deal as with Chapter 1's ending. A hint of normalcy, only for it to be disturbed as Chris pulls out the soul a few more times to steer things in their favor so that Susie can stay at their house, by getting Toriel to invite her over after slashing her tires and getting her to call the police later at night before they wake up in the dead of it, pull the soul out, open the door, turn on the TV that they had plugged in the night before, and take one last look at Susie before stabbing the floor with their blade, creating a dark fountain of their own, before putting the soul back in and sleeping once more, as we see a smile form in the TV and roll credits.
Tenna!
That's where we are now, and I imagine we'll be here for a good while still. And while we do have more evidence of trends regarding the meta side of things, and in the secrets and Easter eggs in general, we still have so many questions and gray areas that have left people at each other's throats for the past few years now as to what it all means. Frankly, I'm still not even fully confident in some of my findings. After all, it's only really set in stone once we see some of these supposed trends carried across maybe 3 or more chapters. But with the second one being a sort of foundation for future ones to be built off of, it does give me more confidence than I might have had initially with only one chapter to work with. And furthermore, the sheer volume of what was found in Chapter 2 puts the first one to bed, honestly. Even what we learned internally, and with the eggs and Rouse gives us so much to work with. And SPAMTON alone has so much depth to him in relation to the fourth wall and meta-fuckery that I had to dedicate a whole segment within a segment to him, and how it contributes to the meta-narrative and how secret bosses in general complement or contrast it. And that's not even going into the weird route, whereas for that, we have no idea how the hell this plays into the meta-narrative, honestly, because of just how out of the blue it was when it was first discovered, and we also have no clue how this is going to affect later chapters or just how future weird routes might unfold, until we actually get more content for Deltarune in, I don't know, at least like 5 or 6 months from now or something. And really, for Deltarune's demo as a whole, there's only
well, we're still waiting for that chapter 3 to 5 release, so.
Such as how the parent object for monster data in the game appears to be named Echidna, referencing the Greek monster of legend, which is a pretty interesting way to tie in its function as a parent object. And to quickly explain in game maker terms what that means, that's just the kind of object that you can link to different children objects, and what that does is, whatever code and traits you put in the parent object, the children objects can inherit those same traits, and it overwrites some of it with their own unique data. And that's what seems to be happening here with Echidna, and it being linked to Darknet data in general, but I don't know how that fits into things at the moment, other than it being a super obscure and more recent discovery. And there's also all the weird as fuck text for the error handlers in the game, which is also in parent objects for things such as interactable objects and what have you.
The Goddard code.
I'll link the respective videos from Halfbread about Echidna.
Okay, yeah, so Goddard code and what is Echidna and Deltarune, I'll probably watch those.
And these error handlers elsewhere if you want a deeper look at it yourself, but it is very strange. Stuff like your eyes became blurry and emptiness filled your hands, or suddenly your body seizes up. What are you looking at? As if this flavor text is commenting on the fact that you shouldn't be seeing these objects at all to begin with. God, and I forgot about the manual too. Fuck.
Oh yeah, the manual
that he gives you in Chapter 1, but you're never able to read it. At least in game, you're not able to. The pages of the manual are actually in the data, and there's some unused features mentioned in there, like the dog option in the battle section, or a talk function for the overworld menu that we'd never actually see. And even that has scripts for it in the code that go unused, and its error handler text, or just using it on invalid targets, just says, your voice echoes aimlessly. And there's also this weird-ass poem and some other error handlers. Like, fuck man, you tell me what to make of this, because even with everything I've covered, I am completely at a loss for these lines. I'd argue these almost go in the same kind of ballpark as the unused scripts maybe, where maybe we might get some context for these later, and I can't imagine
maybe they go used later?
You'll
I don't
actually
know.
see some of this error handler text intentionally if you find some way to break the game, so to speak, in a way that's by design or part of some weird route, but I am throwing completely baseless shots at this point. And that's a good sign for me to say that I think I can safely wrap up my deep dive of Chapter 2 and of this demo in general.
Yes!
Maybe I've missed some really specific things, but I do believe I have everything I could reasonably gather that could be relevant to what this video has always been about. What I think Deltarune is meta-narratively speaking, and what the game's meta-narrative even is, or at least what pieces of it we do have with Chapters 1 and 2.
Now, we get to the good shit.
Can Can we talk about that now? We're like surely over like 30,000 words in. Why are we still on this screen?
Oh. Yeah. The sweepstakes.
That's the $4.99. After everything I've done, you fucking pull up.
But wait, there's more.
There's more, yeah. SPAMTON sweepstakes time! Yes, sir! Where we get probably the most amount of lore in fucking everything. We get the most amount of fucking lore in, like, ages. Where it just piles upon piles of shit to go through, and it's like... It's an overload. Literally an overload. It's like, what the fuck is going on? What? Why is Wayne's World here? What are we doing? What? Why is Spectrum here? What is this lore? Why are there pages of forums going on here about glitch hunting and stuff? Who is Tana? Why is this guitar here? Why is it named Find Her? Who is that? What is the chair doing here? Why is it creepy? Oh, look at that Western Ralsei, Chris, and Susie in these jazz enemies. Who the fuck is Spamton A. Spamton?
September 17th, 2020.
A year after.
Only a few days prior, we got what is, at the moment, the second or maybe actually third most recent status update we have on Deltarune. I don't know, it depends when the last newsletter released. Anyway, chapters 3 through 5 are the next batch of content Toby and company plan to release as a proper full game drop once it's ready.
Yes.
And alongside showing off some neat teasers for chapter 3 and also a bit of chapter 4, we know that they have at least a chapter's worth of stuff already done by now, so let's say they're already about or even over a third of the way through. At most, closer to half. Frankly, it's at least another year before we get more content, assuming there's no severe complications that pop up. But with what we already have, there's still plenty to talk about of the game until then. But aside from this update, we got an announcement for a charity event to celebrate Chapter 2's anniversary. The SPAMTON Sweepstakes being held on the 17th and ending on the 18th. People could donate, and as long as you were in the United States, you could enter once to have a chance at winning one of many cool SPAMTON-themed items.
SPAMTON.
So if you're rich or something, you could participate in a few auctions for some even higher value items, all the money from those auctions also going to charity. With all the content we already got about Deltarune, there was no reason to really think more of this event. It's for a good cause, and this still wasn't the longest gap in content, and to hear that Toby and his team are already making so much progress after just a year is certainly good news.
Do they know? Do they know? Do they know?
I was satisfied with this and was ready to go into the next year waiting just as patiently as usual. Surely there was nothing more to these sweepstakes than just funny items.
Surely not.
Little did I know what I'd wake up to.
Yup. A bunch of secrets! Here we go. Uh-huh.
26 pages. 26 secret pages dotted along the sweepstakes site containing many, many things. From SPAMTON sightings to small and larger peeks at Chapter 3 to, most importantly, a lot of new information about the bigger picture.
Oh yeah, December page got loaded.
A chunk of it being in the form of blog post from a Holiday Girl 1225, aka Noelle Holiday.
Yes.
This motherfucker. He made what is just a few levels away from a Deltarune ARG. If I had any excuse to not make this video, those were completely thrown out the window after I learned of this. Immediately, I took to Twitter, started archiving, screenshotting, recording every little thing I could possibly find in the event it were to be removed after the sweepstakes' conclusion, or just so that I could reach more people. And even then, I still missed a few things here and there. This was fucking huge, and given this was the most recent major development in regards to Deltarune, I'm still kind of processing just how insane this was. What a way to hold us over while we wait for the next 3 chapters. And Jesus Christ, don't even get me started on the fucking finale. RTVS held this stream like 30 minutes beforehand, and somehow I never made the connection that they were involved in making something Deltarune related. It was just like 30 minutes straight of some random cryptic shit before they threw up a link to the finale video. I hadn't felt something that visceral since Chapter 2's announcement a year prior. Just, man. I really want to call attention to just how sudden and surreal this event was for me, because I genuinely did not expect to be getting this much of a peek at new stuff so soon after Chapter 2. I guess to be fair, considering we're getting 3 times the amount of content for the next drop, it makes sense to have much more to tease with, but regardless, it was amazing not only for the new stuff we got to see, but also for the light it shed on things that we might not have even thought twice about before, and on events that took place before our involvement as the player that gave us a very striking insight into our cast of characters, particularly Chris, Susie, and Noelle. And I love it. God, I love it so much.
I love the
I feel
lesson
like
flag
the
for
time
Noelle,
the
for
community
Susie, by the
was
way.
really important, and I'll look back on that time very fondly. But I don't want to spend all this time just rambling over how much I love the sweepstakes, because of course we're here to talk about it in the context of meta stuff. Though, it's kind of hard to do so because this is very far removed from anything relating to the game from a meta standpoint. The medium is entirely different, so it's not like I'm going to get much in terms of what the meta narrative could be or any UI elements that may be important. However, the next best thing I can do is look at what the sweepstakes gave us and see if it adds on to any current leads I already laid out when talking about the first few chapters.
Okay.
So to quickly lay out everything that we got in the sweepstakes, we obviously have all of the secret pages,
Yes.
of which, according to the code web page, and after just counting them myself, there are 26 of them, which I've listed here, not counting the main sweepstakes page and the credits.
credits,
It
okay.
definitely looks like a lot to go through, but thankfully, because of what we're specifically looking for, we can narrow it down quite a bit to 17 pages. And I can even put them into different groups based on what leads it gives us that may be relevant to what I'm talking about. On top of that, we have the SPAMTON Q&A that happens somewhere midways into the sweepstakes. Once again, there are a lot of questions and answers, but I've narrowed it down to a more comfortable 6, maybe at most like 8 that seem relevant maybe. And finally, we have the finale video, but for the sake of my sanity, and also because Toby clarified that anything that may happen in it is not canon, I'm not going to really factor that into it all that much, because if you need to know absolutely anything about RTVS, it's that they are very, and I mean very good, at one thing especially: making shit up.
The games were invented around the time that Julius Caesar bought his first iPad.
Now most of these things you don't have to worry about. It's too stressful to think about all these cables and holes and colors. We don't need any of it. I'm a child.
If you touch the node one more time, there's gonna be hell to pay. I'm gonna bring all the Team Fortress 2 mercenaries to your house, and they're going to shoot rockets at you, and hit you and your dog with hammers.
But with that out of the way, let's just start by looking through all the pages that I thought were important for this video. First, with what I'd like to call the trailhead of the whole thing. Code and comments. You can access code through the web ring ad at the bottom of the main sweepstakes page, and likely this is the first blog post from Noelle you would have come across, either this or Cat Petters. While at first this post seems totally unrelated to Deltarune, you'll see that her allusion to Dragon Blazers is actually meant to be a parallel to the Deltarune sweepstakes. Right now the post says that she found about 26 pages, but this number was actually lower during the sweepstakes and would be updated over time to count the number of pages that either people have discovered, or that Toby knew would be reasonably accessible to people at any given moment. So this page is just to declare how many secret sites there are, as well as introducing us to the whole Noelle blog element of the sweepstakes, making sure that people understood it wasn't an outright ARG, but did have stuff hidden in it. However, this is the point where I do want to mention something that I hadn't brought up until now, and this is one of those things that I think people in general didn't catch on to all that much until the sweepstakes shed a light on it. That being, there are quite a lot of allusions to this fictional game in Deltarune, Dragon Blazers. And when you look at most, if not all these references to it, they actually can make pretty good parallels to things that either happened or could happen in Deltarune. So for instance, Susie mentioning Dragon Blazers 2 in Queen's Mansion and talking about how even if her sister gets cursed and has bad stats, she's still your party member. Which in a way could be an allusion to Noelle and her inexperience with Dark Worlds, at least on a normal route. And there's a reference to Dragon Blazers 3 mentioned in both chapters in the hospital. The first time with Noelle saying that she's stuck at the Ice Palace, and the second time her playing it with Rudy, or not on a weird route, and being stuck at a certain point. Mentioning that the mage left the party, as well as mention of a move called Fire Shock, which is very similar to Noelle's Ice Shock ability in the Dark World. And of course, when Noelle is taught how combat works in the Dark World, she directly compares it to Dragon Blazers, so with all of this in mind, and knowing what else the sweepstakes have hidden for us, it definitely implies that there's connections to be made between the two, and Dragon Blazers possibly acting as foreshadowing for Deltarune. This might be very important for my theory, as it is an instance of Deltarune, a fictional piece of work, making its own fiction to allude to itself. And
Yep.
not only that, but knowing that we might visit the Ice Palace and Dragon Blaze's related stuff in the future, I'm certain this will eventually become relevant. Hell, it already kind of is. But I'll get back to that later. Moving on, the code page doesn't have more for us other than a link to the comments page. There isn't much for us in this one other than an interaction between Noelle and Birdley, and then eventually Sports, who I now assume to be Jockington. Though I originally thought maybe it was Chris, but aside from the username, Jockington also is known to have many images of the same soccer ball as shown here in Deltarune, so it's definitely him.
Okay.
The only thing I could really note here is Birdley's phone number, which I first thought may have been a lead. This is Molly. Today is September 17th, 2022. SPAMTON sweepstakes are happening. What I was expecting a lot of crazy rewards, you know, maybe a bit of lore here and there. What I was not expecting was info on Chapter 3 through several fucking secret pages.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on. We haven't even unlocked everything yet, but we got Chapter 3 sneak peeks through this, so that's really cool. But okay, I've already compiled everything I could right now. There's a specific page, it's the Dragon Blazer's comments.
Okay.
Birdley is one of the people commenting, and, you know, his like first username is his phone number, and they're saying like, you know, whoever's prank calling my phone needs to stop. The phone number is right there. I'm gonna try calling it. I don't know if it's gonna take me anywhere. I don't know if it's gonna do anything. I don't know if it was just a bunch of random numbers, but I'm gonna see. I'm gonna call it right now, and I'm gonna see if I get anything. This is just to try it out. This is the only thing I haven't really done while I'm waiting on everything else to get unlocked, so
Yeah.
yeah, no, okay, that does nothing. Okay. But, you know, I just wanted to try it. I was
Okay.
curious. That's all. But not only does it not really take you anywhere, but the number is also randomized.
Yeah, it's
every time
randomized.
you load the page, so it doesn't really matter. That about does it for the trail.
And apparently, that was a real number, but they had to change it to randomly generated number. So, but also apparently it was a number that had no relation to the Deltarune or Undertale sweepstakes or anything at all. Same with Holiday Girl 25 at like hotmail@gmail.com, whatever.
So now let's look into the next real batch of pages that I thought were important for this video, and that is everything regarding the egg.
Cat petters.
One of the very few pages in the sweepstakes that you're unable to access through a link is Man. This page just simply shows a sprite of one of the trees from the Scarlet Forest that we know to be associated with the man himself, with the caption for the page simply saying, behind the tree. Clicking at the very top of this tree, or clicking on the link for the cardboard box's description, takes you to our next blog post, Cat Petters. This
Okay.
post goes over one of the other game series that is alluded to in Deltarune, Cat Petters, which is
Yes.
a reference to the Pets series of games and are pretty closely paralleled in terms of description. Noelle talks about how the game is known for having a very deep animation system that's led to people modding the game a lot to have pets of whatever the hell they want, but this leading to them not being compatible, and causing breeding between modded pets to be a little bit spooky, which we know Noelle loves. And with the accompanying music showing an example, the modded pet breeding would result in either the average vine sauce corruption or the game simply saying incompatible pet with the music glitching out and scaring the shit out of Noelle to the point that she'd punish her pets for trying to fall in love. But at the end we get Until One Day, which takes us to the next part of this post, named Egg. This is the first post on Noelle's blog that goes completely dark visually. No more background, no logo or whatever, it's just plain old black and gray with white text. But before I talk about the contents of this page, let me show you something in this blog's code if you inspect it.
Yes?
See this body class thing right
Yeah.
here? How it says dark?
Dark.
If you change it to literally anything else, the page actually goes back to normal. It
Huh.
only goes completely black like this when the body class is set to dark. I
Huh.
can't tell you for sure what this by itself
It's
might imply,
interesting.
if anything, other than the use of a class for this being dark could be one of many allusions to something going on with Noelle that I will get to in a moment. Oh goodness gracious. But as
Oh,
for
boy.
the contents of this page, she goes over how if you have no pets, there's a rare chance for an egg to appear and give you one, which is how you can get some of the secret cats. However, one time when Noelle was trying to get said secret cats, she instead got a white egg with only the message special accompanying it. She had never heard of this before, and she waited to see it hatch, but it never did. She tried to get rid of it, worrying that it was a glitch or corruption, but she would not be able to move or throw the egg away. All she could do was click on it, and it would make a weird sound. She eventually just decided to raise it like a normal pet until it suddenly left the next day, as she was thinking about uploading it somewhere as a mod with a message saying that the egg left home due to happiness, whereas the game would usually say that a pet would leave due to sadness. And at the end of the post, she says that the egg actually had a name, but she doesn't remember what it was, and it's been driving her crazy, before asking for anyone to sign her guest book if anyone else has seen it. Which I want to talk about for a moment, actually, and I just want to state this for the record. I've seen the occasional acknowledgement of the fact that if you were to send an email to an address with the name HolidayGirl1225, you would get a response back that appeared to be automated from a Al Gaylord. I remember this back from when the sweepstakes were first happening, when the blog post used to say, please send me an email or something along those lines at the end. And for the record, this email is not related to Deltarune or Undertale whatsoever, and this was confirmed by Fangamer in this email right here, literally when the sweepstakes were happening. And I don't see any reason to doubt their denial of it. And you might say, but Molly, what if they're just saying that because they can't confirm any ARG stuff? One, this was specified to not be an ARG specifically. I've dealt with ARGs for long enough to know how important this specification is, because if it's left unchecked, shit like this can happen, or worse. And two, if it really was related to Deltarune in any way, Fangamer would have probably neither confirmed nor denied it. And that's usually how it goes when you do these sorts of interactions in my experience. So again, I have no reason to doubt their word on this. I just mentioned it because I've seen in the past month or so some people still talking about it as a potential real mystery, and to be fair, the sweepstakes and the nature of that event being what it was, that shit was hectic. It all came out in the span of like a day or two.
It did.
But it also made me realize that there's probably no actual source compiling what happened with this outright, but this is why the pages would later change to say, please sign my guest book at the end, before linking back to the code page. If Fangamer's denial of it wasn't enough for some reason, they literally had to edit the blog post. I don't think it gets any more solid than that. That's all, I just felt that was important to get out there. Back on topic. Now, while Noelle might have thought that the egg happened due to having too many mods, this egg does sound awfully familiar, doesn't it?
It does.
Can't do anything with it other than have it make a weird sound, and it always finding some way to get back, even if you try to throw it away. This egg behaves almost identically to how the two eggs you can get in Deltarune behave, which, in a way, makes Cat Pedders another instance of Deltarune using its own fictional media to refer to itself. This is very intriguing. While it doesn't really give much in the way of answers for why these eggs are even appearing or how they manage to maintain their form between the light and dark worlds, there is something here that might—
I'm sorry I'm not talking on that much, I'm just kind of observing.
The eggs are genuinely related to Gaster, and it's this last line here, that Noelle, no matter how hard she tried, could not remember the egg's name. When it comes to anything involving Gaster, there is a lot of effort made to do everything but refer to him by name, save for the Gaster followers. You can't even name yourself Gaster without the game restarting or crashing altogether, and the only ways we can really connect anything to Gaster are through certain calling cards of his rather than him directly, let alone by name. And even if this is a bit of a reach, the message that accompanied the egg, special, was written in all caps, so maybe there's something to that. And
maybe
when
there
else
is.
we learn of Noelle, there's certainly more than enough implications that there's something possibly going on between her and Gaster, but I'll get to that later. Otherwise, I think this page was one of multiple instances of us getting just a bit more information.
My phone dinged.
But there's still plenty that we don't know yet that I don't think warrants us being fully confident in knowing just what is going on with stuff like the egg. But at least we know Noelle has some relation to it and where the egg stuff might have first derived from. There is one more page, though, that relates to Cat Pedders, which you can
multiplying
for the Peepus
blue circle
description, which takes you to the blue circle page.
Huh.
Here, Noelle talks about her habit of checking every email she gets, including spam emails. And just from seeing her descriptions of one of the emails, they definitely are alluding to SPAMTON, and one time she got an email that was just random numbers and letters.
Okay.
She plugged it into Cat Pedders too, and in it she got a new pet, which was just a single blue circle. It would never move, and it would occasionally just glitch out and had bad stats, and most other pets didn't like it. But this blue circle had a unique trait of multiplying itself eventually, each time popping up a congratulations message. And of course, as more of the blue circles did this, they would exponentially multiply, to the point that Noelle had to wipe all of her pets from the game. And that's about it. It goes without saying that this was SPAMTON actually communicating to Noelle and giving her a Peepus in the form of a pet for her funny video game. And this calls attention to another thing that people might have missed out on before the sweepstakes but caught on to a little more. That being a very particular connection that SPAMTON and Noelle have. I'll quickly diverge and talk about the Q&A for a moment, as there's a few answers that SPAMTON gave here that pretty much explain the events of this blog post from his end, and I think for the first time in this whole series, I'm actually going to talk about this a little bit, Noelle's older sister. In Chapter 2, we get a lot of allusions to deaths, where before, all we knew is that Des, like, hit Chris with a wiffle bat or something. But here, we see not only her name mentioned multiple times, like spelled out once, and then also shown to be the reason Noelle froze up at her spelling bee and let Birdley win, as it was one of the words she had to spell, but there's a lot of implications that Des is not here. At the very least, just missing, likely even in her earlier childhood, since if you go into her room, while her search results aren't directly stated, one of them is a calendar where every month is December and every day is the 25th.
Okay.
So, she was searching December holiday in the computer lab a fucking lot, and with how Queen talks about her search history, she seems a bit concerned for her in that regard, and not to mention with Des rarely being mentioned in Hopetown and there being no grief for her, we have no idea where she is or what her condition is at the moment. But this is where SPAMTON comes in. In the light world, SPAMTON was simply just the mere concept of spam emails. But because Noelle would always check every email she got, she would especially check emails that SPAMTON sent to her that he describes as free friend find her. So she was really looking everywhere for any information on her, which SPAMTON says he of course didn't have, but would have loved to know any valuable information about Des or her likeness. People originally thought that this implied that Noelle was SPAMTON's mother, but in the Q&A this is clarified in that that's not the case at all, but rather that she was the only one that read all of his emails, which is why he gave her a little blue gift, that being the same peepus that Noelle describes in the Blue Circle page. So that pretty much establishes all the history that SPAMTON and Noelle had with each other before Deltarune takes place as a game, and it explains SPAMTON's particular connection to her and how that plays into the weird route, but with him referring to her as an angel and giving her the thorn ring as a gift after she wipes out Cyber City. And I grouped this page into the rest of the stuff about the egg because I do think both Egg and Blue Circle illustrate a very interesting aspect of Noelle's backstory. Because not only do we know that SPAMTON has connections to her directly, but the egg post even implies that the man behind the tree that would see a few times in the game is also connected to her, which may even be Gaster that is connected to her. And knowing that Gaster definitely influenced SPAMTON and maybe at least partially related to the egg stuff, it does make me wonder, what the fuck could Gaster have to do with her? And
Whether it's clear that Noelle has some innate ability to find herself connecting back to Gaster things to interesting secrets and glitch hunting. So why is that, and what the hell does happen, and what the hell even happened here with her, Gaster, and Des? I feel like we're gonna get, like, more lore about that in later chapters about, like, who the hell Des is and why she's so important to everything.
And that's not even all of the fuel in regards to that, but we'll get there soon enough. For now, let's move on. And let me show you a little secret. This is one of the pages you can access from the random ads that show up at the top of the sweepstakes site. 4 rows of 4 closets, most of which containing nothing, but a few containing stuff like a Rousey plush, a Peepus, or the screenshot referencing Superbad as a sort of inspiration for this event, probably. But aside from the main event that you're probably expecting, there is one other particular item that is really intriguing and terrifying. I'm going to link to a really good video that goes over the finer details of this discovery that Spooky Dude made, but to get to the point...
The gumball machine.
See this gumball machine? This isn't a stock image that Toby put up as a joke.
What?
It's a combination of different stock images of gumball machines put together and slightly edited, but Toby and company made this gumball machine asset themselves. This is... I don't even know what to say. There's one item description in the sweepstakes where SPAMTON refers to those chewed up bubblegum wrappers, which could be referencing this gumball machine, but other than that, I think this is it. Was Halfbread right? I mean, the only place where a gumball machine would make sense to appear, other than the festival that's supposed to be coming up in game in later chapters, is Icy's Petsa, and we only have one other instance in either Deltarune or Undertale that I can really point to where the use of heavily photoshopped assets were prominent. Is Omega Icy going to be real? I don't think a single teaser in this entire event has terrified me more than this one. I don't know if I can handle this information. Let's just move on. Let's just forget this ever happened. I'm not ready for this yet. Fuck that. Okay. Back on topic. In this page, most of the prizes you get, you can click back onto the main page and keep going with the closets, until you hit the 3rd closet on the last row, which takes you to...
a chair.
This shows nothing but a sprite of a chair with a cloth of some kind hanging from it. Judging from the look of it, I can't really attribute the appearance of this chair to anything in the game thus far, but it looks like it could be something to see during nighttime, or perhaps in some secret area in a future dark world. The caption for this page reads, "But what if it could?" Clicking on this chair changes it to a warping version of this sprite, shifting and almost completely covered in darkness. Save for random blue pixels that vaguely remind me of the way that the tiles in Cyber City used to kind of corrupt and shift around a bit. The sound that plays here is almost identical to the ambient water noise used in Undertale, mainly with going with the boat person, or in some select other places like the room with
Okay.
Except here, it's distorted, and the caption now reads, "Get darker than dark." But what if it could get darker than dark? A direct reference to Gaster in Entry 17, a use of something from Waterfall from Undertale, and not only that, but if you happen to be lucky, or maybe unlucky enough, clicking on this chair will give you a small jump scare of someone's laughter, the file name for this laughter being face.mp3, and showing nothing but a pair of eyes, one yellow and one pink, before sending you back to the main page. A friend that we haven't seen since Queen's Basement. And even if you just go back a page to the closets, the page is now broken, leaving only the one leading to the chair page open, none of them being interactable anymore, and the caption just reading, "You won?" with a question mark. While the connections to Gaster and between Deltarune and Undertale were already pretty clear, there's definitely no harm in having more fuel for that, with how vague everything still is. And if anything, seeing this pair of eyes definitely confirms that whoever this is, which the name of the sprite is just Eyes, this will be an important character that we'll come across in the future, and they have something to do with Gaster and with whatever this chair is. Perhaps they're the next secret boss after all? We'll just have to wait and see what the next chapters drop, really. The next batch of pages that are of interest starts with Icy, through another ad you can click at the top of the main page. This takes you to an Icy cryptid sighting website, documenting one of the sightings, courtesy of who appears to be a much younger Noelle Holiday, young enough that Des was still around at this time.
Yes.
The sighting itself doesn't provide too much of interest other than the worrying detail that that burnt Icy box is somewhere beneath the graveyard. And again, I don't know if I could handle Icy becoming a real part of the story, let alone a secret boss or something on the level of Omega Flowey. At the end of the page, though, there's a link that's supposed to take us to the Icy settings that Des provided. However, clicking on it takes us to December. A fake 404 page makes it look like Internet Explorer. It very well could just be another allusion to the fact that Des's existence is very much up in the air at the moment, and the fact that we get so little about her anywhere is definitely worrying. But this page does pull a pretty clever one. One of the suggestions on this 404 page is to basically check your spelling. December didn't work. So,
maybe
what
Des.
Des. It's a red guitar.
Wait, what the hell? Okay, what the hell is this?
It's a red guitar. Clicking on it plays a track called FindHer.ogg.
And Des is nowhere to be found with Eyeblink or anything, but...
At the very least, if we don't know much about her, there's one thing that this page does confirm. Finding Des is going to be an important part of the story. And if the name of the track being a literal prompt to find her wasn't enough proof of that, then I don't really know what is. She could be the character behind the unused strings. She could be the knight. She could be anywhere. But regardless, she is somewhere. Even if that somewhere might be nowhere. I personally think if there's anything all this meta stuff is really building up to, this definitely has to be one of the biggest parts of it. And I wouldn't be surprised if that only further rings true when chapters 3 through 5 drop. And while we're on this topic of talking about the main cast of characters, let's move on to the next few pages of interest.
Okay, Chris Noelle, who's it?
Chris Streamer Chris, found through the link in the description for the Heart Locket, one of 2 private blog posts that actually give us some insight into Chris. This short but rather informative post gives us a glimpse of what Chris's friendship with Noelle was like in the past, and that they'd always come over to hang out with her before getting very still. As if they were remembering something, and then saying they were going to the dining room to get a snack, only to play on the piano. At first, she would go in to watch them play, only for Chris to stop playing after they'd notice her, so she just stayed on the couch in the living room to listen to them, which sometimes went for hours or until she fell asleep. She would wonder if they were thinking about her or if they were just here because she had a piano, but she could never really tell for sure. But she would just close her eyes and it would feel like a concert just for her. This post fascinates me. Chris is undoubtedly one of the most important characters when it comes to both Deltarune's narrative and more meta aspects, because aside from them being the character that we have control over, any information we can possibly learn about them without our influence on them could eventually lead to us learning more about what got them into their current situation in Deltarune, and I'd argue most importantly, why they're in said situation to even begin with. Yet, even with what we learn here, this ultimately raises even more questions, as I get the feeling that judging from their behavior, they've kind of just been like this, as in always doing things rather suddenly. being hard to read in terms of how they feel towards others. And the line about them getting very still, as if they were remembering something, sticks out to me a lot. I think whatever it is about them that's made them the way that they are, I'm willing to bet it must have been earlier in their life. I don't know how early exactly, but the fact that something stops them every time they hang out with Noelle, and their way of dealing with the sudden recollection is by playing the piano until someone walks in on them, really implies that there's something Chris might be keeping buried mentally. Maybe they just want to get really good at piano. Maybe there's something about playing the piano that helps them remember more or pass through more of whatever's on their mind, given they're said to sometimes play it for hours. But Chris and pianos, either way, just seem to go very closely together. For one thing, the audio that can be played on this page is just this mess of overlapping and echoing piano playing. It's hard to tell what melody is even trying to be played, if any, until it just becomes completely muffled. I like to imagine this as possibly how Noelle hears.
Wasn't there like a hidden thing with this piano music?
Playing it, but there's many open interpretations I feel for what this track's significance could really be. Overall, it does further cement that there's something very important to Chris about piano. We not only see pianos mentioned in Chris's room in Queen's Mansion and tutorials on playing piano, but we get a few opportunities to try play one in the game, and in both chapters, it doesn't really work out. But Chris is apparently annoyed by it, which makes me think of something else. We now know that Chris doesn't really like to be watched when they play piano. They immediately stop as soon as someone notices them. And we know for damn sure they're aware of us and how we're observing everything Chris does. I wonder if the reason the piano sounds so fucked when you try to play it in Deltarune is because they know you're watching and just feel uncomfortable knowing that you're watching them do everything that they do, including something that they're already a bit iffy with anyone seeing them do to begin with, let alone someone like us who's exerting control over them. It would fit in as well with how they very intentionally find moments to rip the soul out to make sure there's specific things that you don't get to control or even see Chris do. And it paints a very interesting picture already for not only what kind of person Chris really is, but how they feel about the player and their control over them.
True.
And we haven't even talked about the other private blog post that concerns Chris, this second one also involving Susie.
Yeah, the newest girl girl.
Called the newest girl girl. Here Noelle mentions that Susie really hates Chris in particular for some reason, and that Chris just hasn't bothered to tell their mom about her bullying them, and hasn't switched seats with Noelle despite Susie never bullying Noelle at all by comparison. And she goes over one particularly worrying incident between Susie and Chris, where Susie eats an apple that Alfie's had on her desk before threatening Chris with biting them in half too, since they've gone out of the way to use apple shampoo. And Chris starts snickering as if holding back a laugh, to which Susie throws the apple at them and Chris blocks it with their notebook and catches it before taking a bite out of it themselves. Susie gets pissed and grabs Chris by the hair, saying that one day their mom's going to get sick of them and that once she does, someone might make them disappear, and she'll realize how happy she was without them. Chris doesn't say anything, even after Susie yells at them to do so. And Noelle says that Chris's mouth looked like it moved, but so slightly that she couldn't even tell if they actually said something or not. But whatever they did or said, Susie suddenly shifted her whole demeanor, letting go of Chris and leaving the room really quickly. Noelle jumps into her locker, and all she could see was Susie leaving the school with her head held low before Chris opens her locker door, just stands there, and then slowly shuts the door and leaves. Now, obviously, the most common question that I've seen everyone have in regards to this post is, what the hell
did Chris even say?
To Susie to warrant her attitude changing so much? And I think the most obvious things we can rule out would be anything in the form of a comeback or a snarky comment, as I'm pretty sure that would have just pissed Susie off even more. And honestly, with the fact that Susie really hated Chris in particular, it makes me wonder if there's some unspoken history between her and Chris that may even predate their time in hometown or in the school, considering that at this point Susie is considered as the new girl. Or if you want more fuel for this, there's a specific moment in Chapter 1 where, after Susie threatens to bite Chris's face off, if you sprint all the way to the upper hall, she says something about how Chris would have experience with running away, as if she's known them long enough to notice it as a tendency that Chris has. Alternatively, it could be that maybe she doesn't actually know Chris from any point before hometown, but that she has been around other humans before that were afraid of her, so seeing a human act so unbothered under pressure would naturally confuse and frustrate the shit out of her. Yet, Chris themselves appearing to be a bit unfamiliar with humans in general and more familiar with monsters would see that Susie does stand out even as a monster, but understands them enough that maybe they know there's gotta be a softer spot for her somewhere and that she'll come around. We definitely see throughout chapters 1 and 2 that they sort of build their friendship partially off of having this mutual understanding of rejecting societal norms for their respective origins. Chris gets Susie, in a way, and Susie gets Chris just based off of that alone. So, I think Chris would know better than to enable Susie's anger. They certainly seem confident enough to know how to act around her without getting into too much trouble, and without being as scared either. And it had to be something very brief, too, like a few words, given that they were so quiet and subtle that for all we know, Chris might not have even said anything at all. But assuming they did, I have maybe 2 guesses. The first guess I have is that they probably said something actually really nice or surprisingly welcoming. I feel like Chris snickered at Susie not because they were trying to piss her off, and because, and this is my guess, they felt nice knowing that Susie actually noticed them using Apple shampoo. I mean, we see said shampoo in the bathroom in Toriel's house, and even after this post in Chapter 2, Susie makes another comment about them using it after you do one of the letter puzzles, specifically the one that spells apple. And I probably do not need to go over the fucking mountain of examples that show Chris has a particular fondness for Susie. They really do care about her a lot and enjoy having her around, even when she's being mean to them. For all I know, they probably did actually take Susie's comment in the post about Chris ending up like that apple as a joke. They found it endearing enough that they were trying to not laugh from that, not necessarily because they thought she was bluffing or they were being edgy or something. And as for what they could have said, if it relates to this, it could be something like, "Glad you noticed," or "Thanks." The second guess I have, though, would be that they said something more genuinely worrying.
Yeah.
Not a comeback or anything sarcastic, but just kind of a what the fuck kind of thing. Something that would have made Susie just feel baffled or have taken her out of her anger completely. Most often, I see the guess for what they could have said in this context being possibly, "I hope so," or "do it," or something of that sort. Since people have noticed in Chapter 1 that even though Susie still bullies Chris, she does make an effort here to actually say that she won't bite their face off, because she wouldn't want Toriel to bury her own child and that they've got a good mom. Comparing that to the blog post where she outright says that Toriel will get sick of them eventually, and it's easy to connect the dots this way, thinking that perhaps Chris feels like a burden to their family.
The sheer difference in that Susan makes an effort to avoid this kind of content in Chapter 1 does give this interpretation some weight. I don't know, even if that would require one to assume that Chris really does feel that poorly of himself, which we don't really know for sure, at least to my knowledge. We don't know that at all. Yeah, so, I don't know. It's gonna be very interesting for later chapters that build off of more lore and stuff. And I do hope that we get at least something like SPAMTON Sweepstakes again. Not even to the caliber that SPAMTON Sweepstakes was, because I know that it's not gonna happen. We won't get anything that big again, but I hope that we get something like that, even if it's on a smaller scale. I do hope that we get something like that that reveals more lore for the world and the universe and the game and these characters, because yeah, lore is cool. Lore fuels the theorizers. So
they almost hope they're forgotten, or that Toriel gets tired of them for whatever reason. Them saying that would probably make her feel actually concerned if this is the case, enough so that maybe she just feel like she went too far. And on top of what would be Chris implying that she should make them disappear, I'd leave the room pretty quickly too if I was in—
A funny way to phrase this really is, do you think Susie's actually capable of murder? She's the bully, but being essentially dare to actually make someone disappear, taking another person's life at a whole level. In fact, I think Susie v. Lancer, in fact, I think the Susie vs. Lancer fight kind of demonstrates my point, where she ultimately doesn't want to kill anyone outright.
In her position. But another thing that might work in this sort of context, assuming that her and Chris have history, would be simply, "I'm sorry." Susie fucking hated Chris in particular. There's no clear reason why she picked so much on them specifically, considering that she's a newer student to the school and that Chris comes across generally as being a more timid and reserved person. Save for the occasional harmless prank that they played to get a quick scare out of people, but nothing more. But her hatred for them grew so bad that she outright hoped that their mom would get sick of them and that they would disappear in some way. If Susie and Chris have some kind of history that we don't know about, maybe they had a fallout at some point that led to Susie getting especially really upset with them as a result of something that happened. But
Sure.
I really feel like it would be the kind of thing where I can see Chris in that moment, knowing why Susie would be so upset with them in particular, and not having anything to say other than just sorry. Just an apology or showing
If not
that they're
sorry, then in any case, at least being brief, that would be much more remorseful or sentimental on Chris' part. The kind of thing they would have to just ignore or shout over, especially if such strong feelings are involved between them.
for whatever it was that happened between
True.
them could have caught Susie off guard. enough so that she would be rethinking everything that she was doing just then and just leaving the room quickly to just get herself together again. There could be some fuel for this too, as in Chapter 1, after Chris finds Susie eating the chalk, Susie just assumes that Chris is going to tell Alphys or someone about it and that they hope she gets removed from the school, to which Chris is implied to genuinely be kind of shocked to hear that, judging from what Susie says right after with, "Don't act shocked." They don't want to hurt Susie or put her in any danger, yet she's used to everyone thinking this way about her. So, without a doubt, people being kind to her or genuinely trying to be friends with and resolving stuff with her would definitely take her at least a little bit by surprise, in my opinion.
It would.
It kinda screams abandonment issues and a shitty home environment, if you're asking me, and her fight against Lancer in Chapter 1 only adds to that. Not to mention some of the parallels that Susie draws to King's dialogue in Chapter 1. Yet, equally, there's still the chance that it's not necessarily because Susie and Chris had any prior history, but rather that Susie just has a bad history with humans in general. And her own preconceived notions of how humans or people in her past in general, human or monster, treated her, led to her forming this aggressive exterior, to the point that even if she's not trying to be intimidating, other monsters can help but assume that of her. Really, it could be any of these things I just mentioned. Whether they were trying to be actually nice, or they hoped that Susie would actually make them disappear, or they were really sorry for whatever could have strained their friendship so much. They said something that made Susie start to shift her approach towards Chris over time, even if only slightly at first. Though, as much as I'm open to the idea that Susie just has a bad history with humans in general, and Chris being calm around her just caught her by surprise that much, part of me sort of doubts that someone who barely knows Susie would be able to get this kind of reaction out of her.
True.
Getting her angry? Of course. Maybe even making her surprised by acting a bit nice to her isn't all that unlikely. But the thing is, Chris isn't the only character who has shown kindness to Susie. I think back to that moment where Susie tells Noelle about when she let her borrow her candy cane pencil, and how Susie remembered that kindness from Noelle and didn't bully her because of that, and it makes me think that whatever Chris said couldn't have been so simply polite. Her leaving the room so quickly and holding her head low doesn't tell me, oh god, someone was nice to me and I wasn't expecting that.
This doesn't feel like the kind of reaction Susie usually displays for when someone's being kind of nicer. It feels less flustered and more sentimental and reflective. Whatever Chris said, I think, was something that hit her much more personally, but not in a way that would make her angry.
Give me something much deeper. Something that only Chris would have been able to evoke from her. I guess this is to say, in pretty much every case to me, it feels like it confirms that if there's anything to learn from this blog post in particular, it's that any potential history between Chris and Susie definitely goes further back than the school at least. And hopefully we get a better idea of just what that history might be, if there is any, but we'll never know for sure at the moment. After all, who knows what Chris is thinking. It's such an interesting development, these two posts specifically. They both give us a lot more information on just how Chris interacts with Noelle and Susie, and yet while being completely separate events, they both imply something about Chris that seems to stem from much further in their past. We have whatever it is that Chris remembers when they hang out with Noelle that prompts them to use the piano in the house. And we also have whatever history they might have with Susie and the fallout that may have occurred that caused so much tension between them. At the very least, we have two very important events within Chris's life that have been hinted at, which we don't quite have full knowledge of, yet they both impacted Chris a lot. I'd argue especially the former one with how it essentially autopilots them to the piano every time they remember that specific event at Noelle's house, and the latter one, if true, dealing a huge blow to Chris and Susie's friendship that only in chapters 1 and 2 is beginning to mend itself. Or at least, that is my best assumption, and perhaps I'm wrong somewhere, as a lot of this is still left very open. It's just as likely that I'm looking too deep into this, as we know that there's definitely more than just two very important events that went on in Chris's life that would contextualize how they got into the situation they're in now with us in the picture. Let's not forget, of course, that Chris's parents are divorced and that they probably have some very complicated feelings about themselves regarding their relation to their older brother. But I think either way, whatever happened, it will play a big role in the game, not just narratively, but meta-narratively too. After all, Chris is the only real view we have into this game's world, and I'm sure whatever they did or got themselves involved with to have us taking control of them will be reflective of the themes of the game and core to what Deltarune is ultimately trying to get at. But I think that finally does it for just these 2 pages.
Okay. We have more pages to go through.
Although, there is one more set that I've saved for last. That being the very last few that were revealed during the sweepstakes before the finale video hit.
10.
This last set, I'd say, starts with the TV page that can be found in RAM, the page with the interactive green room. Clicking on the door on the right takes you to a page with nothing but this TV. The caption says that it's off, and there is nothing else to do in this page. Clicking on it does nothing, reading does nothing, inspecting the code for this page you get nothing of note. However, people did discover there was a second spread associated with this TV, one where a red X is scribbled all over it. People wouldn't know what this meant or how to see it until the very last set of pages was revealed through the SPAMTON engraved wedding rings, starting properly with Damn you, Tenna. The caption here says, delete this, and we finally see the TV with the red X over it. Accompanying it is text from SPAMTON talking about that damn boob tube who we can assume to be this Tenna that has been mentioned in the URL. And highlighting the very bottom of the page, we see hidden text that just says, Mike, singling him out as the only person SPAMTON isn't actually mad at here. This is where a lot of previous interpretations of SPAMTON kind of got thrown out the window. A lot of people were assuming that Mike was going to be the next antagonist of the game or the next secret boss, but what seems more likely is that Mike was actually just an associate, a good friend of his that had something happen to him. Maybe he's still a secret boss thanks to whatever it was that happened, but it's clear now that SPAMTON wasn't mad at Mike, but rather this Tenna person. And Tenna did something to really hurt SPAMTON and possibly also Mike.
True.
Hell, maybe he's the reason that whatever SPAMTON was doing or working with previously to become a big shot suddenly disappeared. Either way, you can actually click on the TV in this page, taking you to a lot of noise. The caption now says, you're early. Scrolling midway down, you get text from probably still SPAMTON just saying, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be here. And at the bottom of the page, you can see two images of this same noise that blend in with the background, but scrolling does make them stand out a little more. The one at the very bottom takes you back to the green room page, but the one at the top
takes you to here.
Is just a blue screen. The caption, aren't you forgetting something? Scrolling all the way up, you start to see white squares and rectangles of different sizes until you reach this pathway. It's all just white, black, and blue tiles, so it's hard to tell what it is, but it's clearly an entrance to some place. And clicking on the entrance, we get our final blog post from this event.
Yes.
Ice Palace Glacier. Here, Noelle talks about the Ice Palace from Dragon Blazers, something she mentioned once in Deltarune, but worth noting that unlike in Chapter, there is no additional number for the game, just Dragon Blazers. This might be the first game in the series that she's talking about rather than the third. She describes it as this ice area that no matter where you go, takes you back to the same room, and that if you were missing a specific character from the party, you're basically just stuck in there forever, with the devs claiming it was the bad guy's magic spells, rather than just an oversight on their part. She would spend hours wandering in this place, thinking there was an exit, to which she reveals that there is one. After somehow going every possible direction, the last one being up, you find a door that doesn't appear anywhere else in the game. It shocked her so much that she unplugged the console by accident, but even when she started the game again, she was able to get back to the door pretty consistently. Although, she says that she doesn't know how, and it feels different every time. She ends the post, and that's it. There's a lot to get out of this. Not only a name drop for very likely the next main antagonist of the game, but also more allusions to this Ice Palace.
Yeah,
and
and
even
Dragon
possible
Blazers.
connections to make between it and Noelle in regards to how to navigate it, considering she mentioned she was able to find a potential exit to it consistently, even if she doesn't really understand how. I'm pretty certain that we're going to run into the Ice Palace or a parallel to it in the game at some point, and that Dragon Blazers will become a more proper part of the game. If not in Chapter 3, then at some point in Chapter 4 or even 5. And we might need Noelle for if we ever see some equivalent to the Ice Palace, if not just that place straight up in the Dark World.
Yeah.
I think this especially is a big reason why I feel the sweepstakes warranted its own segment in this series. In regards to the fact that Deltarune plays a lot already with the idea of making fiction within it itself already being fiction, there is a lot of emphasis and allusions to Dragon Blazers, especially in this event. The direct parallel between it and Deltarune in the code page, as well as pretty much implying we're going to see some version of the Ice Palace in the game, perhaps as a secret area or build up to a secret boss or even a normal boss, who the fuck knows at this point. It all points towards this idea that this game within the game that we already are playing is going to become more directly relevant. I'd assume as a Dragon Blazers themed Dark World, or it being a part of one, or even we just sort of play Dragon Blazers, like it's not even the Dark World anymore, but literally just a whole other game. Though that might not be much different, since the combat is implied to be similar to Deltarune's, according to Noelle at least. If anything, it's definitely a parallel, but I can't be sure whether there's more to it or whether it will become even bigger gameplay-wise or metafictionally. In fact, honestly, aside from the SPAMTON Q&A, there's really not anything left to talk about. That pretty much was all the essential stuff I wanted to go over before we finally get into the theory and what it can imply for the game going forward. In regards to the Q&A, I already mentioned the ones about Des and also him sending a peepus to Noelle, but there's some other interesting things. Mainly him pretty much confirming elemental pairs to be a thing, some more insight into his divorce with Jevil, another nod to the egg referring to the white one as another man's treasure, so clearly not directly related to SPAMTON like the peepus is, and further confirming that Mike is or was a good friend of his. And he even questions the person asking about Mike by accusing them of being part of that cathode's crew. So Tana might have had something to do with Mike after all, or if not that, then SPAMTON did a lot to make sure Mike was left out of whatever Tana was doing. So, essentially, just a few confirmations of things that we already had suspicions of, as well as doubling down on what was already made pretty clear through the sweepstakes itself.
Oh boy. The Molly Stars ARG.
I guess that's it.
Wow. Damn.
There was a lot for me to talk about just to get to this point, I'm aware. But I guess talking about the meta aspects of 2 entire demos, as well as whatever an outside source with 20-something pages of secret content might add to those aspects, definitely took longer than even I thought. Like, holy shit, I started writing the script for this in like October. Look where we are now. I also understand a lot of this discussion is stuff that's been covered a lot by a lot of different people. But I feel like I didn't want to settle for just going like, oh, check out so-and-so's video like a dozen or so times. I only really did that here if I felt like it wouldn't add anything to my theory anyway, but finally coming over all this stuff after all the hype from Chapter 2 and the sweepstakes, and especially for Chapter 1 with how long it's been since Survey Program came out, felt like it wouldn't hurt to do. Absurd video length aside. And it doesn't help either that because of how Deltarune and Undertale blur the line a lot between what is solely meta and what is solely within the confines of the game, or what applies to both, it feels like I can't talk about just meta stuff without having to address certain characters like Chris or Noelle or what have you, because they might directly or indirectly play a part in it as well. Which, if my insane theory and guesses about how this game is approaching meta stuff is right, will explain why I even went through the effort I did to be this utterly meticulous with analyzing everything I could.
Okay.
So, 68 or so pages, 39 or so thousand words in, probably close to 4, maybe even 5 hours into the video if the words to minutes conversion I did was accurate.
Okay.
I think it's time.
Ooh.
As I mentioned in the very beginning of this series, I do believe there is a reason, a structure to all of these things I discussed. The way the UI and menus were designed, the distinction and feeling and vibe between the light and dark worlds, the approach to the secret bosses, the addition of certain Easter eggs and secrets, and an
I can't wait to hear what this actual theory is.
Very specific abilities in the game, and the connection of main characters to a figure known entirely for his discovery through said exploits, data mining and file manipulation alike, the various allusions to said figure through certain signatures of his, not to mention the very intentional design of certain meta elements to stand out from everything else in the data, all have to come together to something, surely. Whether it's a message Toby is trying to get across to us, or just a very cool method of immersion on his part, I think there is a way to put this at least somewhat together with what we currently have. Let's completely throw analysis and objectivity out the fucking window now. From this point forward, we are going off the deep end, and you may as well just stick with me to face the music if you somehow made it this far.
Here we go.
Let us discuss the device theory.
In part 3.
In part 3, that's...
Yes.
With the covering of the sweepstakes and
In
also
part
how fucking
3.
long this part already is, Jesus Christ, this marks the end of the second part of this analysis. If you have made it this far, then I appreciate it greatly. Part 3 should be coming after this one, so if you're curious to see just how far I end up going into complete theorizing insanity, feel free to subscribe so you know when it drops.
Also, gonna sub to Molly, because why not? Also, let's hope that chapters 3 to 5 don't drop in between now and part 3. because that would throw a wrench in this entirely if there's more and newer meta aspects in the game. In the meta narrative.
I'll end up enjoying it, but I really can't say for sure, since at least with parts 1 and 2 there was plenty of objective stuff to dig into, but from here, you have no idea. But regardless, I do hope people will like the interpretations I've gotten out of everything thus far. If you enjoyed this, feel free to drop a like, or otherwise you can let me know what
I enjoyed this. I very much enjoyed this one. I'm not going to watch the outro here, but I very much did enjoy this one. It's a lot shorter than the other parts. I know it was more of me just watching instead of actually pausing and commenting and shit like that. But that was it for the Device 3 for now until part 3 comes out. Once part 3 comes out, I will be reacting to it. So, I'll see all of you in the next video. Later.